Welcome to the Lead Well podcast. Around here, we believe leadership shouldn't cost you your peace, your well-being, or the parts of yourself you've worked so hard to reclaim. I'm your host, Trasetta Washington, leadership wellness coach and strategist, and my mission is to give you practical, actionable steps to help you reduce overwhelm, lead more effectively, and build a sustainable rhythm for both your team and your life. Let's dive into today's conversation. Hey leaders, welcome back to the Lead Well podcast. Today I want to talk about boundaries because if there's one thing I know about mission-driven leaders, it's that boundaries are rarely a lack of knowledge issue. Most of you already know that you need boundaries. The struggle is actually holding them, especially when you care very deeply about the people you serve, the work that you do, and the impact that you are responsible for. And all that tension can be exhausting. And, for a lot of leaders, boundaries can feel a bit heavy because they come with guilt. They come with second guessing yourself and that quiet internal voice asking, am I doing enough? Or what if I let somebody down? So instead of feeling like support, boundaries start to feel like something that you have to defend, right? Mission-driven work makes this even harder because when the work matters to you on a personal level, when it's tied to your values, your community, or service, it doesn't feel easy or even appropriate sometimes to kind of draw lines. And the work doesn't clock out. Right? The needs don't stop. And because you care, it can start to feel like you shouldn't stop either. This is usually where boundaries tend to get misunderstood. I want you to understand that boundaries are not barriers. They're not walls that you have to build up. They're not about shutting people out or, having to disengage from the work that you do. Healthy boundaries actually create clarity. What they do is allow you to connect without having to deplete yourself. Barriers, on the other hand, push people away. Boundaries let people know how to be in relationship with you without draining you or without depleting you. When most leaders think about boundaries, they usually think about time first, right? They think about calendars, their meetings, availability. But in my experience, time boundaries are often the last ones that break. The first ones are usually emotional. Now, emotional boundaries are about what you absorb, right? And this is especially hard for mission-driven leaders because empathy is a part of how you lead, how you care, how you listen. And, you want to be present, but somewhere along the way, that can turn into carrying emotions that were never yours to hold in the first place. I see this when leaders take responsibility for how everyone feels, right? When they replay conversations over and over again in their head, when they feel personally distressed because someone else is frustrated, disappointed, or overwhelmed. Right. And so empathy ends up turning into emotional labor, and emotional labor, when it is persistent or constant, that is exhausting. Right. Healthy emotional boundaries don't mean that you stop caring. What that means is you learn the difference between being compassionate and being responsible, meaning you can hold space without having to hold the weight of it. You can support without having to absorb. And that distinction alone can free up more energy than you probably even expect. Now, then there are time boundaries, which this is a thing that most leaders think that they're struggling with. But the real issue underneath is about expectations, right? Time boundaries aren't just blocking off your calendar, right? It's more so about what you have trained people to expect from you, whether that is immediate responses, constant availability, saying yes because it just feels easier than having to explain why you're saying no. And over time, that creates urgency, and that urgency becomes your default, even when there's actually not anything that's urgent. I have worked with leaders who technically had reasonable workloads, but their days were fragmented into tiny little pieces because everyone felt entitled to their attention at any given moment. And that constant interruption drains your focus and creates this low level sense of pressure that never really turns off. Protecting your time isn't about doing less. It requires you to be more intentional with what you give your attention to. It's deciding when you're going to be accessible and when you're not, and being consistent enough that people can trust that boundary instead of feeling like they have to test it. Then there are identity boundaries, which I think these are the most important and the least talked about. Identity boundaries are about separating who you are from what you do. In fact, I think this is such an important conversation. I think I'm going to have to do an episode specifically about identity boundaries because I think that we as a society tend to get so engrossed in the work that we do that we take on that as who we are. That's evidenced by when we go to networking events and we're introducing ourselves to people that we're just meeting. We typically introduce ourselves as what we do, not who we are. But anyway, I digress. Right. But, so when leadership, back to what I was talking about, when leadership becomes your identity instead of your role, right, or your position, boundaries can start to feel really threatening to you. And saying no feels like you're letting people down. And even taking time to rest can feel irresponsible. That is when leaders start to overfunction, right? They take on way more than they really need to, not because they have to, but because it feels unsafe to not do that. And I see this a lot in leaders who have been the strong one, right? The reliable one, the one who's always figuring things out. And when that's how you've been affirmed for years or decades or even your entire life, it is hard to imagine leading in any other way. But here's the truth. When your identity is fused to your output, what you produce, burnout isn't just a possibility. It is the trajectory that you are on. It's almost inevitable. And so identity boundaries allow you to say, leadership is something that I do. It is not the sum total of who I am. And that shift helps to create space for you to rest, space for you to delegate, space for you to lead with more clarity instead of from this place of feeling pressured all the time. And what's powerful is that when leaders strengthen these three types of boundaries, the emotional boundaries, time boundaries, and identity boundaries, everything else starts to feel lighter. You can, those decisions become much more clear. Your energy steadies off, right? It's not like a roller coaster ride. And teams are able to respond with relief or more intention rather than having to resist or push back all the time, because boundaries don't make you less accessible. They make you more present. Now, boundaries also require communication, right? I'm not talking about long explanations or justifications. What I'm talking about is being clear and using calm language. This is sharing what your limits are unapologetically. Holding consistency even when it feels uncomfortable. And most of the time, people don't push back against boundaries because they're unreasonable. They just push back because it's new, it's unfamiliar. And what's interesting is how boundaries actually can strengthen your leadership presence. Leaders who have strong boundaries tend to feel more grounded, more steady, less reactive. Their decision-making gets clearer because there's less emotional noise flying around, and your team will respond to that. When you create boundaries that are predictable, that helps to build and grow trust within your team. Now, people can step up because now you have stopped overfunctioning. You've stopped stepping into their lane. You stopped taking over. I want you to think about boundaries as a form of self-respect, right? What they do is communicate what you value, your time, your energy, your humanity, your capacity. And whether you realize it or not, you are teaching your team how to treat you through what you allow. I think that's worthy of repeating. You are teaching your team how to treat you through what you allow. Not only that, you are modeling what sustainable leadership looks like for them if you are setting and holding boundaries, right? And I want to leave you with this thought. Boundaries do not create distance. They don't create barriers that block people out. What they do is create freedom. Freedom for you to lead from a place of clarity, freedom for you to stay connected without burning yourself out, and the freedom to do work in a way that actually is sustainable. Now, if you're listening to this and you're realizing that, hey, Trasetta, I could use some support holding my boundaries, especially in this season, because right now I feel overloaded. My plate is full. It's overflowing. That is exactly why the Lead Well Academy exists. It's a free learning and connection space that I created for mission-driven leaders who want tools, community, and support so that they can lead with more clarity and ease without carrying everything alone. Think of it as a place for you to reflect, learn, and grow alongside other leaders who understand the weight of what you're carrying. You can head to the show notes to find the link there so that you can join us. And while you're there, be sure that you grab the Leadership Reset Toolkit. It's a resource that I designed to help you release overwhelm and build a leadership rhythm that really fits the season of life and leadership that you're in right now. All right. As always, take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and of course, be gentle with yourself as you lead. Until next time, lead well and live well.